2 days to the general election in Nigeria and the last day for all presidential and national assembly campaigns. In the spirit of unity and comradeship, following the collapse of the boot party structure into the Labour Party, Peter Obi's numerical strength seems to have increased in terms of polling unit agents. The unity will also provide moral and other support to help actualize Obi's ambition as the next president of Nigeria. Joining us now to discuss more on Labour Party campaign activities, strategies, and winning formula ahead of this Saturday's presidential and national assembly elections is Professor Utomi, a chieftain of the Labour Party of Nigeria. Thank you very much, Professor Utomi, for joining us on the morning show.
Great pleasure.
Well, yesterday you released a statement ahead of the general elections titled "A Perfect Mess, New Possibilities." How perfect is the mess in which Nigeria has found itself, and what are those new possibilities?
The mess doesn't get worse than this. I mean, an inchoate economy, dysfunctional financial system, people are queuing for money, they're queuing for petrol, they're queuing. The only thing they're not queuing for right now is fresh air to breathe. People are frustrated. And this has been a build-up. How is it possible to have governments that are completely insensitive to the people? Well, it is possible because our democracy has stopped being about the people. It is possible because we've created what we call democracy, that's essentially a government of politicians, for politicians, by politicians. Nigeria has a desperate need for a new beginning. New ideas that create wealth, new ideas that recognize that the people matter. The fundamental philosophy of politics is broken in Nigeria. We need not just healing, we need a new beginning. So that is the kind of perfect mess that we are in. The question is, will the nature of the political process allow Nigerians a new beginning? This is what the struggle is about. And very, very sadly, I think for our country, we've allowed form to overtake substance in discussing elections and where we are going. And so we get the international community who they know the corrupt politicians, they've known them, they have missions here, they know what they're doing. They know those who suppress votes. They know those who kill for power. And suddenly everybody wants to be peace, peace. It almost reminds you of Neville Chamberlain going to Hitler and saying peace in our time. But the peace that they made 4 years ago has taken 130-something million Nigerians into poverty of a nature that nobody who is truly, truly human can feel good about. They know that this peace, which we got the last time, has underdeveloped Nigeria with all its potential. The human capital is exiting. Nothing is as it should be. So why should Nigerians not seize the opportunity to get rid of this kind of political class? But complicity of the middle who expect that they can profit from certain people in power, complicity of the international community itself that just wants stability and not democracy. And so this is a classic example of how democracy dies. Whether it is Runciman writing about this from Cambridge, or it's Ziblatt, Levitsky and Ziblatt writing about this from Harvard. This is a classic of how democracy dies. So the struggle on Saturday in Nigeria is how to save democracy.
How do we save that democracy? What are the possibilities?
The possibilities are that the people of Nigeria who woke up, since 1999, the Afrobarometer has measured the interest of Africans across the board in democracy. How do they feel about democracy? It has been in continuous decline. You see it in elections, apathy, voting apathy at elections, and all of this. But the political class don't care. If you are of you come to vote, it's better for them, so they can buy the few who go to vote and continue in power, whether they govern well or not govern well. This has brought us to the point where Nigeria has become strategically irrelevant in the world. And they will say, oh, Nigeria is punching below its weight. But it seems to please them. The Nigerian youth finally decided that they had had enough. They tried to show that something was wrong about their institutions, the rule of law, with the NSAS protests, that they were essentially being killed by their own police. And what happened? They were met with such brutality and force that they decided to go back and come through the ballot box. These woke Nigerians up after years of slumber, deciding democracy was a farce and a joke. They decided to wake up and try the ballot box to stop them. And as we can see, there has been nothing spared to go to vote suppression. Some recs, if they are not reassigned today, makes INEC complicit in the failure to make this democracy acceptable to decent people. So we have come to a point where the young people of Nigeria first stood up. And others say, yes, we are with them, but the system is trying to beat them back. And Nigerian people must say no more. If we die, we die. Because they are dying every day. The quality of their lives make them living dead because of the kind of governance that is taking place in Nigeria. So maybe sometimes it's better to die than to live in the conditions that they create.
All right, deep words you've spoken and some crucial things you've also said. In fact, what you've essentially also talked about is your perhaps lack of confidence in the process come 25th of February. Especially, you've been known to criticize the way that INEC has handled this process and not having faith in the transparency of it. You also talked about Rex, and one whom you've spoken out very vocally about is the Lagos State Resident Electoral Commissioner, Mr. Segun Agbaje, who is still in office, and we have only 48 hours to go to the elections. Do you think INEC is ready in terms of a fair playing ground for all parties, including yours, the Labour Party, to ensure that Nigerians are able to exercise their franchise come Saturday?
I think there are question marks around the readiness in places. But what solution do we have? It might be suboptimal. We have to go on. But if they are wise, they should repose people like Segun Agbaje. If they are wise, to give credibility to this process. And they can. His skills are as valuable in Jigawa as they are in Lagos. So, but going forward, you are going to, back in the 40s, a certain economist called Herbert Simon, looking at how government works, basically says, well, it just satisfies. You model through. So we don't expect a perfect outcome. We're going to model through. But how is this modeling through ensuring that we can keep Nigeria functional and a source of progress for its people, rather than a place that is young people are jumping on every boat, every aircraft, every drive through the desert to just get out? This is what is at stake. This is the referendum Nigerians are going through. Can they continue this order, or can they reclaim and rebuild their country?
It's so difficult for them to continue this order. A lot of people have argued vehemently. But the truth has to be said that these systems don't go away. Like what happened in Nnewi North, that a hunter found a lot of PVCs, and those PVCs were brought to Authority FM. People are collecting the PVCs. But most of the polling units are the polling units INEC released in their list that people are not going to be voting there. So despite people getting their PVCs now through the hunter, how is that going to be a case of reconciliation? That's one. Two, the Labour Party candidate that was killed in Enugu State, that was burnt. What would you say about those two things?
It's not the first time that Labour has been visited with such. You saw the rally in Lagos. You saw what happened that day. Why does democracy have to be this vicious? What is at stake? Rather than a different perspective on how to govern. Our problem is that we have made politics too attractive for criminally minded people. And so the Nigerian state has become almost a criminal enterprise. The most criminally minded are the ones most likely to grab power in the way Nigeria is configured. What do you do when that perception goes into global thinking that those who run Nigeria are criminals. I think that if the international community is to stop fussing around and putting this funny thing on election peace and all of that, piece of the graveyard.
You don't believe in election peace? Why are you saying the international community is fussing around and putting this thing on election peace?
Because it is the form of it rather than the substance that they are dealing with. When the issues that lead to violence are not treated. Look, I was one of those who campaigned for an international criminal court. People thought, I still talk about a very cold winter morning in January of 1997, going to make a presentation to the editorial board of the Christian Science Monitor in Boston about the need for an international criminal court. And I made the point that the institutions of many developing countries, African countries, in the main, are unable to deal with issues of justice and fairness and equity for the citizen. And therefore, it was important to internationalize the issue, to create mega supranational institutions. When I finished my presentation, the General Board members said to me, Pat, this is a little ideal. But less than 3 years later, the Rome Treaty passed. I didn't get all of what I pleaded for, at least. We got the International Criminal Court that deals with genocide and all of that. I actually also pleaded for an International Economic Crimes Court. Our institutions are far too weak to allow the progress that we need. And so we should not do this thing about form. We should get to the substance. Why do people struggle so much for elections? Why should politics be so lucrative for reasons other than service to the people, that anybody who's, criminal enough or desperate enough wants to gain political power? These are the fundamental issues we should be tackling.
Newi, quickly.
Newi is a manifestation of the desperation of those who want to suppress the people and hold on to power. And this is why I say that it's an existential challenge for the Nigerian people where we are today. You can't look at that and say, oh, this process is okay. It's not okay. There are fundamental things wrong. How do you deal with the fact that INEC is even creating new polling stations and sending people 2 miles away from where they registered to vote, knowing what vehicular movement is like on elections day? How do you deal with this? I suggested, when I provided some of this criticism, that maybe there is a competence problem with logistics. It can happen. That is not a big problem. But can we take people who have capacity and infuse into the process? Private sector can volunteer to do certain things.
Prof, let's move on quickly to these elections. Now, I got something that was being circulated this morning. It's an interview you granted at some point. I don't think it's a new one. But you were shown there, and you were quoted as saying, I think what happened to Lagos was that it got very lucky and got a fellow called Bola Ahmed Tinubu to be governor in 1999. So they said Professor Party Chieftain. And they are using you to campaign antecedent matters. Vote the best man to redirect our dear beloved country, Nigeria, on the path of greatness. So what changed? Now you are supporting Peter Obi. But here, in your own words, you are there, you said it. The video is here. I can forward it to you later. So what changed? Why Peter Obi? I will reserve the other question till later.
Many things changed. Bola Tinubu, in my opinion, as a person judging, does not have the mental and physical capacity to govern today. That changed. I was there in 1999 and made choices. I could have been on the Obasanjo side. I wasn't against Obasanjo, but I wanted to see a Lagos well governed. And we'd been in this struggle, Nadeko, Abiola, together. I thought, let that passion go into governing Lagos. Many years, I don't want Nigeria to be another Ture Yaradua scenario, where we're struggling between Seyi and Remi Tinubu. This country has gone through too much that is wrong for us to know the truth and pretend that we can manage it. It's not right.
All right. Okay, so
why Peter Obi?
Yes, sir.
Peter Obi was found by the people in a series of remarks that embodied a sense of the new Nigeria that they were looking for. And I think that he then presented a good vehicle to birth a new way of doing things in Nigeria. And I know him enough to know that there are issues of character that make me comfortable. The issues of sacrifice in his life, because we need to sacrifice to advance the common good of all. There are issues of competence. He started life as a businessman. Even as an undergraduate at the University of Nigeria, he owned businesses in Nsukka. In fact, the Sultan, I am told, was actually living in a house as a young lieutenant in Nsukka that was owned by a student called Peter Obi. And so his entrepreneurial energies have enabled him to understand the problems of this country. This country is a country kept down by regulatory risk. And you need somebody who started life as a businessman, who knows the challenge of regulatory risk in the economic environment. Not somebody who became a businessman after he made money in government. There's a fundamental difference. And so you need that kind of thinking to move our country to a stage where it can create wealth for the people and we can have a better quality of life rather than people being dragged further and further down into poverty. How happy are we that after so many years, we suddenly claim the pole as the poverty capital of the world, and we produce more poor people than China and India put together, who are, 2.8 billion people, and we are just 170 million people. When I read the Brookings Institution study that gave us that title, the pain I felt, I couldn't get up from my bed for hours. And we continue down this path, knowing that the politics of Nigeria has not been about developing the people and giving them a better life. Yet we go on because it suits a few politicians. And I think that there's a time that we have to say, we have had enough. We need as a country to move on. And Peter Obi represented that vehicle to begin to look at a new direction.
All right, let's talk about this issue around we've had enough. In 2015, there was a clamor for this as well. Having gone through 8 years of the Jonathan administration and 16 years of PDP rule, Nigerians wanted something different. And so they were desperate for a change. Hence the emergence of the current president, President Muhammadu Buhari. Now, some Nigerians who clamored for that change are complaining that they now want another change. And so on the bed of this is what a lot of young people are clamoring for, anything but the old order. This didn't work 8 years ago. What is going to be different? Because people have said that he doesn't have the experience, the doggedness to take us out of this mess, as you mentioned, to the next level.
Let me clear a few things that are, people create these narratives that are silly sometimes. How do you say Peter Obi does not have the experience? He has 8 years as governor of a state. Bola Tinubu had 8 years as governor of a state. Peter Obi has built businesses, became a millionaire in the UK, not in this our rent economy, before he came back. How can you in good conscience say he has no experience? So these narratives are created to leave certain impressions. And that is not a reasonable thing to accept. Then, why we clamored or who clamored this election and then it didn't, that's democracy. You don't want something, you don't want this. You try something else. It doesn't work, you try something else until you get what you want. That's how democracy works. Ghana was way ahead of Nigeria on the failed state index for a long time for a simple reason that it went from one election cycle to the other, replacing the government in power. Nigeria has to develop that consciousness to replace the government in power. I mean, in many democracies of the world, the question that is asked at election day is, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago or 5 years ago, whatever number of years? If you are convinced in your conscience you're not better off, vote differently. Eventually, that will lead the one that has left power to learn about how to treat people differently. And perhaps it might return to power in some time. I have said repeatedly that what the APC should be doing is holding rallies of apology. I was one of those who founded the APC. The manifesto of the APC was written on my dining table. And I realized a few months into the election that the government was going to fail remarkably, spectacularly. And I said so. And it's there. You can measure the things I suggested would happen and how they've all happened. So I think Nigeria should try a different thing. And perhaps the pressure to better perform than the one before it will lead the country towards progress.
All right.
All right. Okay. I understand we'll have to go now.
Yes,
I still had a lot more questions to ask you anyway.
Thank you very much, Professor Pat Utomi.